What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Before we start, I just want to fill you guys in on what's going on with Spawncast, which is our usual podcast every week that we put up on SoundCloud. There was an issue with SoundCloud where it seemed like they were going to be going out of business, but now they're working on securing private funds from different investors. So I'm not sure if they're going out of business or not, but I started backing up all of the audio files, and then I was working to then put them on some other podcast, RSS, and we'll see from there. But I just want to let you know I'm going to keep posting them. I just want to see how this pans out with SoundCloud, and if I have to move everything to another service, which I don't mind. I would just like to know that SoundCloud's going to be around for a while. But with that, guys, let's get started. So first up today, we're going to talk about a very interesting topic that was brought up by developers of Gran Turismo Sport. If you don't know, that's Polyphony Digital, who is currently working on it. They had some interesting things to say about future hardware coming up. Apparently, they're not only developing for the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 4 Pro, but they're developing things like their models in-game around the cars for future consoles that apparently, in their minds, could run their game at 8K. And this was in an interview with Finder.com. They asked them all about how things are going with Gran Turismo Sport, because of course, Sony has not had a good piece of competition from like Gran Turismo, for example, against Forza, which Forza has pretty much has run away with the racing simulation game for quite a while now, right? I mean, everyone buys Xbox for Forza. If you want a racing game, that's what you do. Or you can play it on PC. Either way, Sony has not had a good competitive racing simulator game for a little while now, and Gran Turismo Sport is, I guess, going to be shaping up for that. But it's just been taking so long, and they had some insight as to why it's taking so long, and they said this. It takes 6 months to create a single car it's over-spec'd for PS4 Pro, so we are building for future versions of the console rather than the one we see today. And that was interesting to just bring that up, right? Saying, hey, we're working on stuff for the PS4 Pro, but we're over-speccing this so that in future consoles, you know, whenever the PS5, I guess, in their mind comes out, well, it'll run great on that. In fact, it'll do really well with higher resolution, because after the person running the interview here kind of went back to touch on that, the developers then said this: I think it would be no problem to run it at 8K even. And I know there's been a lot of people who are like, man, we're just trying to get 4K figured out, and then they start talking about 8K now, how they're maybe we'll work towards 8K. And this is always the thing that I think people are getting a little concerned about. Are we going to always be chasing resolution over things like frame rate, right? Because obviously you do 4K, then you do 8K, and you're like, wow, that sounds really cool on the box or for marketing. 8K sounds so much better than 60 FPS, right? When you sell it to somebody, because you can put 8K on the side of the box and really cool rainbow looking numbers and letters, and it's real easy to sell it to somebody who has no idea what that means. But in this case, yes, they probably will keep chasing resolution. I mean, to put 8K in perspective, think of 1080p. Think of 4 1080p screens stacked kind of like in a grid. Then take that grid, stack it 4 more times, and that'll then give you 8K. It's like that. So how do you think it's going to run when you put it on a system that maybe is set up for 4K and then it tries to push for 8K? You're going to get things like upscaling, obviously, like we see now, where we have like the PS4 Pro, for example, that uses checkerboard upscale to get the 4K. It's one of those things, I guess, we're just going to keep chasing resolution. I think I'd prefer stay at 4K and give us 60 frames next generation rather than try to shoot for that lofty goal of 8K. I will at least remark here that generally racing games are easier to run on systems. We see it with things like the Xbox One that was having a hard time with 1080p. Well, here comes Forza, and it could run at 1080p 60 frames without too much issue. Xbox One X, for example, runs Forza at a really nice looking 4K native and 60 frames. So racing games, yes. I'm more curious about things like when we get into things like Battlefield. Is that going to run at 8K? I don't know. I don't think so. Next up, let's talk about NBA Live 18. I know maybe you're a fan of the basketball games and you like the 2K series. I can't blame you because, well, 2K apparently has been doing this much better than NBA Live for a while. Remember that whole thing that they went through with NBA Live where it was supposed to be coming out and they scrapped it and canceled it and it turned into this big debacle. Super embarrassing, obviously, for EA. Well, it looks like they're going to try something kind of creative here. They're going to be including all of the players from the WNBA. Now, I know there's some people out there who are like, well, the Women's National Basketball Association, their ratings aren't very good. So I don't know how many people are going to buy this game specifically for that. And it's really to me, that's not that big of a deal, because what we're seeing here for NBA Live, they're trying something new. You know, they're adding something that we haven't had in basketball games at all, right? I mean, this is something that 2K does not have. Rather than try to do the exact same thing that 2K is doing, why not try something different? Add something in your game that is unique and something you can say, well, the competition doesn't have WNBA players in their game, so if you want that, you gotta buy NBA Live this year. And what they've said is you can kind of play them in like quick games, so you can pick the teams and play in like quick matches offline. And yes, it's primitive right now, right? Because it's apparently it's their first time doing it. But we see sports games that start out very primitive and then they start adding more and more as we go along every year. Because let's face it, they could easily release an expansion every year rather than sell you a brand new game all the time. That's just the way it is. They'll keep adding on. If it works out for NBA Live, I could see 2K trying to get into this as well. And then they just try to add career mode, all this stuff to it so that you could have the WNBA and then the NBA kind of in one game. I like the idea. Again, it's something new, so why not? Now, if you've been waiting for Rime on the Nintendo Switch, you've probably been waiting a while because I know it came out earlier this year on the PS4. I played it. It was fine. It worked well. It was a fun game overall. It came out on Steam also, and Xbox and everything. It's basically been out for a while now. Well, they've been working to get it done on the Switch and I guess get it ported over. They said they're running through some issues between handheld mode and docked mode and everything. Sounds like they got it all figured out because they finally gave us a full release date of November 14th here in the States. I believe it's November 17th in the UK, but overall, it's at least coming out. We have a release date because there's been so long that people have been trying to figure out what's going on. Now, they're going to have two versions, obviously. The physical version, according to them, has to be $40, but they're going to include a $10 soundtrack in there to kind of mitigate the cost there, where the digital version is $30, $29.99. Well, if you'd want the digital and then the soundtrack, it would be $40 anyway. So that's kind of them just trying to add a little extra in there for that physical cost. Either way, it's a good game. I like the idea of it. I like the look of the game. It was very, very nice looking. And what's interesting is it didn't run super well on other systems, including PC. That may have had more to do with kind of their anti-piracy system that was built in, as we heard about, because when they removed it, it started running better. But it didn't run like super well on the PS4, so it's gonna be really, really interesting to see how it runs on the Switch. I would expect a ton of side-by-side comparisons, and obviously Digital Foundry is going to be looking at that frame rate. It should be really interesting to see what the little handheld Switch can do. But also we heard from Inti Creates that apparently Blaster Master Zero did pretty well between the Switch and the 3DS version digitally. They hit over 100,000 units sold, and now, of course, the DLC is coming out. They wanted to let everyone know. They sent me a press release earlier that, of course, Shovel Knight is now available free, so if you want to go get him, you have to get in kind of early. I think after like the first 2 weeks, they'll start charging for him. So if you like Blaster Master Zero, go get Shovel Knight now. It's free DLC until I think the second week, in which case they start charging. I want to say it's $1.99 for him, but if you have it, why not? It's free. Also, it's cool to see Inti Creates actually doing well with something like Blaster Master Zero that kind of has a callback to older Blaster Master. I met them at the convention. They were pretty cool people overall over Too Many Games. And really, it's good to see these kind of games do well on the Switch or the 3DS. The Switch in particular, because we've seen a lot of indie developers say their stuff's selling really well on the Switch. Death Squared, for example, talked about how it didn't do well on Steam, but it did well on the Switch. While I know that's because a lot of Switch gamers are just looking for the next thing to play on their system right now, it's still good to see indie developers do well, because they're usually the ones that are super creative and try to really bring in unique ideas that, let's face it, the AAA developers are not going to take a chance on. A lot of times they would rather stick with really franchises that have been around for a while and already established, because they're riding a lot of money on it, whereas indie developers, obviously, generally it's smaller studios where they work kind of within a budget, but they bring those kind of creative ideas out. So I do enjoy indie developers doing well, and it's good to see that they're selling well on the Switch also. And in our last bit of news today, I want to talk a little bit about the rating system with Mario, because it turns out Mario Odyssey is not going to be E-rated, which is interesting, right? It's going to be E10 plus. Now, is that a big deal? I don't know. That's what's interesting, because people are now trying to figure out, well, what would push it to E10 plus? I can tell you the ratings board describes E10 plus as, well, comic mischief, violence, alcohol use, anything that would push it above an E but not quite to a teen rating. That's really why they made that E10 plus category, is because, well, it could be maybe like you could have like some alcohol or like a beer like on a counter somewhere, and they're like, well, you can't put that in E game, but we can make it E10 because there's no cursing or actual violence in the game. It's very possible. I thought about this. It's very possible that things like the possession mechanic that people are saying, well, he's not possessing the enemies. Well, people could see it that way. Maybe they're like, well, let's make that E10 plus just to cover our bases. Of course, there's also the fact that there are actual looking people now in New Donk City. Maybe the jumping on top of them or knocking them over or something is a little too much for E rating. Really, at this point, it's speculation. You could come up with anything you want, and I'm curious why you guys think Mario Odyssey is not going to get an E rating, but an E10 plus. It's kind of interesting to think about. Of course, when the box art comes out and people take shots of the back, we'll be able to read, well, comic mischief, mild violence, anything like that that could push it over there. I'm very curious what you guys think would be making this E10 plus, though. And that's it for Newswave today, guys. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Let me think about any of the stuff we talked about today, whether it is the WNBA being added to NBA Live. Do you think that's unique enough to give them an edge over NBA 2K, or do you think 2K is just so far ahead of them, it's so ingrained in basketball fans' minds to buy 2K and not Live that it won't really matter? I hope this is something different for the basketball community and that 2K looks at that and says, this could be good. Let's add it to our game. Also, let me think about the 8K phenomenon that is coming up next generation, apparently, where instead of 4K, we're just going to skip 4K, going to go straight to 8K, guys. That's the plan here. And then finally, let me know what you think about that Mario E10 plus rating. I'm curious. That's it for now, guys. I'll see you on Monday.